Great. So we're going to discuss SDG number 10, reduced inequalities today. And that's its logo. I think that's kind of an equal sign with backwards and forwards and up and down, which is quite clever. And this is what's included in it. And you'll see from this that there's quite a lot of crossover with the SDG. I think it was 5 that we did on equal opportunity, sexual equal opportunities. First one is about income inequalities. That's target 1. Sorry, I lost the numbers off the top of the screen for some reason. So there's something to be said in that one, and that relates to B Corps as well. And we've got promote universal social, economic, and political inclusion, which is very much in line with all the other types of sustainability, but it does bring in our inclusion of people in wheelchairs and in the local community, for example. Ensure equal ops and end discrimination is the one that really cross-references well. This one about fiscal, that's tax and so on, and social policies that promote equality is something that we do anyway, but it's worth having another look at. The next one we can't do anything about. So that's 10.5, improved regulation of global financial markets and institutions, not in our remit. And then we've got enhanced representation for developing, I don't know about you, but it's gone off the bottom of the screen. But that's another one that's external to us. As is responsible and well-managed migration policies. There's nothing much we can do about that, although we're on the receiving end potentially of people that have migrated into the country, such as our South African staff. And so potentially we could have a look at our policy for doing that. Things that crop to mind are, making sure that they don't feel obliged to live in accommodation that we've provided. They can live anywhere they like, so there's no risk of there being any suggestion of it being modern slavery. And being very careful about what bills we incur on their behalf, that, for example, with visas and so on, which ones we need to pay for, which ones they need to pay for. Special and differential treatment for, I can't see what it says at the bottom. And encourage development assistance and something, and then reduce transaction costs for migrant remittances, which is quite interesting. So there's a lot on here about immigration, that we could do with looking at our immigration policy. Almost want to get that up on a different screen so I can see what the bottom bit says. I thought this was I found this on the internet. Obviously, I didn't create this, but I thought it kind of summarized some of the key things. There's a couple of slides on here, and we can look at, to what extent we need to do something about these, or we have an ability to do anything about these. So these are all SDG 10, and they've included exploitation of natural resources. So that's chopping trees down in other countries, no matter what it's for, and the fact that it makes it unequal. I suppose an example that I came across relatively recently is big companies nicking the water downstream or upstream of indigenous populations' water, so they end up with no water in their system, while the company sells bottled water to people who could get water out of their taps. This kind and chopping people's trees down to grow palm oil to make money, meanwhile leaving the indigenous populations unable to support their local communities naturally. And from our point of view in a nursery, I think it's about trying to find out a bit about where we source our products from. So when we buy wood, we make sure it's FEFC. When we buy palm oil, look for accreditations or try not to buy palm oil, although it's in just about everything.
We don't use palm oil products.
We hopefully don't.
No, Pete checks it.
For the food, yeah, that's great. But they also get it in soap and all kinds of things. They kind of slink palm oil into deodorants, and it's in so much stuff. It just means that we've got to check what things are made of before we buy them.
Yeah.
Which is why I think the central hub is such a useful thing to do it from centrally, because we know nursery managers don't have enough time to read every ingredient on everything. So I think, you know, we need to make sure we've beefed up our purchasing policy where we can, which we have been doing. But it's just, I think it's an ongoing thing, because sometimes companies change what they have in products and you don't even know, because you're just ordering the same old product, you know, and then suddenly it looks different or it smells different. And you think, oh, what have they done? And they've changed the ingredients altogether. So you can't, you know, it's an ongoing challenge. It's something that we just need to keep checking. And it's also on trust quite often, you know, because other people are checking whether people have used stuff that's unsustainable or not. And we had a big problem with buying fish a few years ago, which is why we don't buy fish in the nurseries anymore, because the people that were verifying the fish wasn't damaging the local oceans were not effective, which does make it incredibly difficult when you learn to trust a company and then they say, actually, no, they're just, you know, people paying for their stamp of recognition, not actually doing anything. So it's, you know, it is an ongoing problem, and I think it's worldwide, this kind of greenwashing thing. And all we can do is our best. I think we just have to be pragmatic about it. Check what we can, do what we can. Don't buy stuff that's obviously come from an unsustainable source, no matter where it's come from. And to be aware that if things do get unequal or more unequal, that people are going to want to migrate to countries where they see a better life for them and their children. And that is causing a problem. And I think with climate change, we're going to have lots of people wanting to come north because it's just too hot around the equator in some areas. You know, middle of Africa is middle of the Middle East is now getting so hot it's over 50 degrees and we can't live like that. So I think we can expect this to get worse. But meanwhile, we just have to do our best on purchasing and welcoming migrants where we can. And recognize that the worst people affected are those that are in vulnerable areas, and children, of course. So it really is in our interests to really look after our ordering, to look after the children of the future, most of which are going to come from Africa. Quite like this one that we can on the right here. These are the things that we can possibly do. So when we're making investments, like with our pension funds or with our savings, to try and make sure they go into sustainable organizations, and that we do what we can politically and socially to make sure that these national arrangements are also fair, which is why we continue to attend DFE sustainability meetings and so on, even though sometimes it feels we're talking to the deaf. I think if we keep talking and keep explaining, then eventually I'm hoping they will listen, not just to us, but to people with more expertise in this area. And that's the other, again, I nicked this off the internet. And this is more about the displacement levels. I mean, I hadn't appreciated over 20 million people being displaced by climate or weather-related hazards already, and it's just getting worse. And what can we do? Well, we just have to try and protect the environment as much as we can, try and keep our carbon footprint as low as we can, encourage others to keep theirs down, and watch out for buying stuff that's making inequalities and conflict worse. So as a company, what can we do? Now, I didn't put in it here anything to do with migration, but I noticed that we've got Zoe on the call, and this might be a time to look at what we have in terms of our policies on recruiting people from abroad, because we need to be as positive as we can be. And Micah also from the legal side might be able to review what we've got there and perhaps improve it. We do have equality of opportunities policies. Diane, you're probably more in a position to say what we've got that's in place in terms of equality, treatments and outcome. But I'm pretty sure that we're compliant anyway, but I think it's one of those things we need to just review periodically and have a system for reviewing our policies to make sure that we all understand them.
So I can give you information regarding the children, obviously in practice, etc. So, and we're actually going through a review at the moment for our English as an additional language policy and procedure, because it's transferring people. So it's always
Yeah.
good practice to basically review training, review the content, review the policy
Yeah,
as you're handing
absolutely.
over to someone else. So because it's a good way of learning. So they're actually going through that currently to make
Right.
sure that it's we're very much in the nurseries, or basically ops team and quality team, is that we don't do tokenism. So it
Yeah.
has to be authentic and it has to be genuine. So
Yeah.
it's looking at the paperwork we put into place. Is it required? Do we need to find out any more information? We spend a lot of time focusing, and we push the teams are very good at this, to be fair, is to understand the cultural background of the family and the child, and also the
Mhm.
social background that they've come from, especially if they've come from abroad to the UK. Um, and then they put things in place to try and support them that way. So I know that we've changed
Yeah.
food menus for certain children, so they then like moved in to the UK food compared to, because it's so different to some other cultural foods.
Sure. Yeah.
Um, but yeah, we do quite a bit to ensure the children feel that they have the same opportunities. Children with EA will have the same opportunities as British born kind of
Absolutely.
English speaking children within the settings, absolutely. As well as celebrating and not forgetting their diversity and their culture that they came with. So
Absolutely. And helping them just to feel that they belong, because we know that if they
ah,
don't feel they belong, they won't be developing well.
yes. Yeah, yeah,
So,
we do lots on belonging and bits and
yeah.
pieces as well, yeah.
And same for staff. And I
Yeah.
think, as a company, we recognize that having a wide as diversity as possible boosts our stability. It's great for innovation. And actually, it's good for the bottom line too. So it makes a lot of sense. Now, some companies maybe don't realize that, but we do.
Yeah.
And I think just sharing the fact that, that it does make a difference and it is helpful is a very positive thing that we can do. Um, Daily life, I thought this was quite interesting when I was doing my research. It was coming up with some suggestions for us to do at home as well as at work. But just day to day to make sure we do raise our voices when we hear of discrimination. And I'm wondering how much we do and whether we shout about it when we do. Maybe that's something to record on on a newsletter from time to time. Is when we've successfully noticed discrimination, then actually done something about it. I know that involves acknowledging potentially a mistake, but sometimes there's great strength in that. Now, I don't know of any recently, but Zoe might have come across some in her capacity in the people department, and you might too as well, Diane. I'm not asking you to come up with them now, but I do think we should do what we can with that, because otherwise, how do we know people are raising their voices against discrimination? I think it's impossible to think that there is no discrimination at home and at work. There must be some. Um, so how often are people raising their voices, and what are they finding they're having to say? And is there a trend at all in that? I mean, Zoe, do you track complaints that have anything to do with discrimination separately to any other complaints? This is
Don't think
people,
we track them separately, but
Mm.
yeah, it's just I don't even know if we track the reasons for the complaint. I'd have to double check what the people advisors are recording.
So that would be really interesting
Yeah,
to track.
we certainly track the complaints and the outcomes, but I don't know if we sort of trend what reasons are being raised. I'd have to double check that. It's worth
Yeah, that would
doing.
be really good, and it would also help us to stop the cause of the complaint if that's possible. And some of them are going to be very individual, but it might be that we've got some trends that we don't know if we don't look at them in trend
We
style.
have got access as well that we've just obviously deployed. We're using for mainly the improvement tools and health and safety at the moment, but we're looking to move our parental complaints onto that system. It might be something, Zoe, that you might want to talk to Sophie about to see if that would help with even if you're just inputting the parameter, do you know what I mean? Kind of basic
Yeah,
info
yeah,
on there, because that will trend it automatically for you, because that's what we're looking for in ops
Mm.
and quality, is actually the trend analysis of the different areas, so we know where to target training, or other bits and pieces, the skill gaps that we have. And that will easily do it for us, and it won't just give you an overarching trend. It will then go into the fine-tuned trends as well. So it could be that it's discrimination and actually racial bias from that discrimination thing or a disability. So kind of it will pull it through, so you can actually see the aspect that kind of seems to be repeated through the complaints. But that might be something that might be helpful for people.
Yeah, I've
Yeah.
got a meeting with Sophie already next week, so
Yes,
I
you
can
have.
add
Yes.
that in to mention.
Thank you.
Poor Sophie.
Yeah, that's great. And when I read this one, supporting migrants and refugees, I did think, well, on our council, on the EOT council, do we have anyone that's got a remit to consider our actions with migrants and refugees in mind? Because if not, then perhaps the council should consider that. That's staff and children. I mean, we know we've got a number of migrants. I mean, we've got what, 30 South Africans. But we've obviously got people from other countries as well that have migrated, in many different countries, being Britain.
Yeah,
I don't know about refugees. I
we
mean,
have
many of us were refugees in previous generations, but maybe not this one.
we have just identified that the colleague council is becoming fairly predominantly white female. So we
Yeah,
have got a communication plan to go out to try and encourage some more diversity and
yeah,
for
I think
people
it'd be
to
really
apply to that
important.
council.
Yeah, that's the last thing we need is a predominantly white female heterosexual council. You know, we need that diversity for sure. So perhaps we can pass that to you guys to do what you can, because it's such a great opportunity to listen to minorities on that council.
Yeah.
Thank you. So there's a whole long list. I'm not going to read it out of the things that I could see that we could do. I think the one I would highlight is that B Corps score. When there's a huge difference between the best paid and the worst paid staff, you score badly on B Corps. Because, I mean, for example, some of the really enormous countries, you know, like ICI, their CEO is paid like 350 times what their apprentices are paid. And it's just massively unfair. But we're probably more like the best scoring, which is about 5 times the difference. But it's just something to be aware. I think, Sandy, you're doing B Corps scoring at the moment, an action plan. So that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, obviously there's confidentiality issues in that, but
Yeah.
but nevertheless, I think it is, you know,
Yeah,
I think
so
we're quite good on it.
we are, when I compare the impact assessment, which is the thing you have to complete for those that don't know, with the one we did in 2020, we are, you know, quite a bit better. But the major jump that we had was because of the employee owned. That's given us a really spike in our score.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of other stuff for us to definitely work on. And I would like to look more into, once it's completed, into the SDG action plans that you can do through the impact assessment.
Yeah.
And how we can move forward with those and what we can put in place and things like that. So yeah, B Corp certainly helps you look at things that you wouldn't necessarily look at potentially.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so there is potentially lots we can do. It's just kind of prioritizing those things, you know, alongside things like getting our Ofsted ratings back to where they should be. Now, you know, there are so many priorities in any business, but it's just trying to work out which ones to focus on when and in which order. But I think working on our diversity will help us with everything else, because it gives us the extra insights and creativity from a different perspective. There's a whole list of hows there. And we've already been discussing it here, really, is how can we protect children and adults from inequalities so it's less likely to happen. Anyone got anything they would like to add other than looking at policies and procedures and now complaints, representation on groups? You got any suggestions there? Just going to shut my door here to shut some noise out while you're thinking.
I can only think of one incident when I was a manager, and it was so innocently done, like, and I mean totally innocently done. So we had a little boy, Michael. He was Black African, and he was struggling at some point. So his toileting was becoming quite irregular. So he'd basically wet through some of his clothes, and we didn't have any others. And his mum hadn't packed any spare clothes in the bag. So we ended up only having Halloween trousers to put on him. That's all we had. So, and we knew his mum wouldn't be happy if we put the pink leggings on. So we chose these black Halloween leggings. Now, they were zombie leggings, so they were all shredded at the thing. So we tried to cut round the bottom to make sure that that they didn't look too Halloweeny, and he was just covered because he had no pants either. It was totally innocently done. So before she even came in, we explained the situation. It's not ideal. Do you have any clothes in the back in your car? As we, they're Halloween trousers. And when he came out, she basically said that we treated him like a slave, and we dressed him like one, because that's how she'd seen it, regardless of the best intentions we'd had. She thought we were basically causing him suffering and belittling him due to his heritage. And we spent a long time trying to repair that trust with that parent over, and it sounds really mean, and it's not, please don't think I'm being dismissive, is that if she just brought in spare clothes that we had asked to do, this would never have happened. But also, we couldn't have there was, in a way, when we were looking at it, it was either pink leggings that she wouldn't have been happy with, and she would have said we were basically embarrassing him, putting him in pink leggings, or we're embarrassing him, putting him in the zombie ones. So it was just kind of, we were in a rock and a hard place. Yeah, so that was a really sad time, to the point that I haven't been a manager for a long time, and that still resonates a lot with me, that someone thought that I did that intentionally to make a child basically be shamed because of their heritage. Yeah. So the protection side of things, I think you can put all the best things in place, and sometimes just it's an accident or unintentional act. But the best way to protect people is to have a reflective outlook, that actually you're going to make mistakes.
Yeah.
And just make sure you learn next time. So like, kind of the next time we phoned his mum and told him she had to bring down some clothes because we didn't have any spare ones. So it became that kind of side of things. So it's making sure you learn from, that's the best way I think you can protect any children or adult from inequalities. So if you make a mistake, is you learn from it. You don't just dismiss it and go, that's not my problem.
Yeah, I totally agree. That kind of open attitude of, tell us what you need, tell us what if we're going wrong, tell us what we can do, and make it clear that we can handle criticism, that it's fine, because we'll learn that way.
Yeah. And I think it's being brave enough sometimes to actually ask questions.
Yeah.
To actually ask the question that you're squirming inside because you don't want to cause offense. But I'm a person that will ask lots of questions anyway. And I'm very much like, if I ask too much, just tell me to stop, because I'm just interested. I'm not trying to dig for anything. I'm just really interested in your culture. But that's how I've learned so much about other people's cultures, because I am just being nosy. Like, it's professionally curious, isn't it? It's just, and I'm curious anyway as a person about other people's cultures. So, a majority of them, I'd say 95% of people that I'd had those conversations with, they didn't care. They answered all my questions. They were happy that I was trying to ask this information. So
yes, it helps avoid that stereotyping of a particular color or creed or culture, where you think, oh, okay, someone's from this country, therefore they wear this.
Yeah.
Well, they don't. They may well wear something completely different, that you didn't know was what they like to wear. I mean, it's just, or build what they like to build. It's not easier. There are millions of people, and with probably millions of different ways of doing things.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. Anyone else?
And it's also like the role play clothes. We've gone for a bit of a transition now with role play clothes. I can remember we used to have every child that came in from like a different culture, we'd have their
traditional dress.
But we never called it traditional dress then. We had their clothes. That's what we say. This is what they wear in China. This is what they wear in Portugal.
And actually they don't.
And they don't wear it at all. So actually it's teaching them that this is ceremonial clothes sometimes, that actually these are only for special occasions, and we would just then actually disrespecting it by putting in the role play area. Because I can, again, that it's the African community, they've taught me a lot, if I'm honest with you, about respect, about different like fabrics and clothing and the way you hold yourself, because they're normally quite forward in telling you you've disrespected, which I think is
Yeah.
brilliant. Like, I'm
Yeah,
very
it
open
just
to
makes
that.
it easy. Yeah.
But they're like, it's more disrespectful you're having that out in the role play area, because we would only wear that for kind of like a really special ceremony. So them walking over it, or them just dumping it in the box, like we keep ours in a box, it's on the top of our wardrobe, and you're like, oh my God, like, oh my God. So you're then taking it back out again and realizing 90% of the time, actually, they're just wearing normal clothes from Primark, like I am. Yes. We all wear
That's
the
what we're
same
here to
clothes.
do.
I
But
remember,
the
yeah,
cultural
I
side of
remember
things, they don't.
actually, sorry, Diane.
No, that's-
I remember in when we were when I was working in the nursery, we had a staff member get quite upset by the fact that a representation of one of her gods was being used as a toy. So you know, you just got it. We just got it from a charity shop. It would look nice. The children could like use it. Quite, you know, like it was quite innocent. But she got quite upset the fact that it was a representation of
Yeah.
her god, one of her gods, and you know, and you just don't think of it, you know, and
No.
it was obviously it was taken away immediately, but that was, you know, that was a bit of an eye opener. It's like you've got to think about these things because we've got such a diverse registration with the children and the staff. You have to think very carefully about the sort of things you are using for the children to play or whatever it might be. So yeah, that was a bit of an eye opener for me personally, and I've forgotten it, so it didn't like upset me because I wasn't involved directly. But now you were saying about the clothes being in the role play area, that kind of sprung to mind. So yeah.
Very interesting. Okay. Right. I'm going to move on. How can we engage with the children? So I took these from a range of different places. Aspire came up with some I found online, some from the DFE. Just suggestions of how to engage with children really on diversity. Homes across the world, I know, is something that we do as part of our OMAP. Role play is something we've always done since the nurseries first opened, but as Diane's just pointed out, we've adapted it, you know, because we were using super power people, and we also use kind of firemen and nurses and doctors and all those kinds of things in role play. But we've got to be a little bit careful with using the cultural outfits when they're not play. It's not play stuff. Unless, I suppose, one's talking about some ceremony, but then you really need to engage with somebody from that culture to lead that.
Yeah.
Or the role play would be misleading for the children. I thought a rather different way of looking at it was, and this is not my idea, was to tally where birds came from that were in the garden, because they emigrate as well. You know, sometimes we have some birds like swallows come in the spring, for example. And where were they before? Well, they were in Africa, for example. So that might be quite an interesting way to do some discussions around this with the older children. And certainly circle time, which again, we all have in all our nurseries and pretty much every group. And we could use various stories about refugees, but also about traveling. And I've got some books to recommend just in a second. There are World Cultures Days. We tend to celebrate a lot of those anyway, particularly when they have festivals. Inclusive games that all children can take part. So that might be, you know, inside or outside, allowing for children that are less mobile. Those kinds of, just thinking about how to make things more inclusive. I like the empathy building games and the colour monster story, which I think most nursery people are aware of the colour monsters. Meeting community helpers, so inviting firemen, policemen, nurses, dentists, so on, vets in, which we do. Definitely something to be encouraged. I quite like the idea of a unity mural. This is where children and adults can put their handprints in different colours, you know, onto a big picture showing the different sizes and different colours. You could have skin colours for them to put their hands in or feet in or whatever they're doing. That seemed to be quite nice. Lots of language exposure when you've got a child in the setting from a different using a different language. Well, we're not trying to teach the other children the language, just that there are different languages. Family trees and portraits can be good, but they can raise some issues, can't they? Family trees and portraits.
Yes.
So yeah, we need to be ready for those, for the extended families, the two mums, the two dads, the no mum and dad, but there's a grandparent or a foster parent, and you know, trying to make sure that our children know that all are good. You know, and then they're part of the group because they're all differences. International snack time's a good one. Meal times, interactive maps, inclusive language, music from around the world's great fun. Try dancing to this, now try dancing to this. Sensory play, which we all do all the time. And I know we also do an all about me thing for every child when they start. Do we do that for the adults? An all about me, is that considered too personal to ask adults about themselves? Just a thought.
I don't think we have anything in place at the moment. I would try and do it informally with people that join my team, but I don't know how many managers would do the same. We don't have anything formal in place.
It's funny that, isn't it? We kind of want to know everything possible about the child, but we don't really ask the adults, you know, what religion are they? You know,
Well, I don't ask religion, I guess, because that's on the application. That's on application form, isn't it?
Yeah, and the colleague information form, but it doesn't really go any further than that. It's just purely what their religion is. It doesn't really touch on different celebrations that they might celebrate. And yeah.
probably
Well, I
just
think the
stays in the
biggest
people
thing-
department. Does it go
Yeah.
out to anyone? And should it, or is that confidential? Is it, you know, it's a little delicate, isn't it?
Well, the biggest thing we've had feedback on, in positive feedback, Jasira, is the question that we ask the parents: what days are important for us to celebrate together?
Yeah.
So like for me, for Esther, it was always her birthday. That's something
Yeah.
that's really significant to us, but also Remembrance Day. That's absolutely massive in our family. And like we rearrange plans, and every Remembrance Sunday, this is what happens. So that's really important.
Yeah.
But actually, there might be other people that would never put that on there. But actually, the staff knew that they had, even if it was just that they always did something on Remembrance Day. So it's a bit of a rubbish situation. But they would always make sure that they learnt a little bit more about Remembrance Day because it was significant to a child that was in the room. And if they had, so we've got one, I can never, Rakashna, I think it's called, and it's a Hindi celebration where it's about brothers and sisters. We used to have the Hindi community come in with their the back, because you get given a
The
bracelet.
friendship bracelets,
Yeah, and we used to go round the rooms and we would be able to give them to each person, so they'd all go home with a little, but they'd get a choice of who they'd have them with. And we were lucky enough to have a parent that went to India before it, and she'd bring us back all the Indian, like the little thin bracelets that we could hand out. So they were like traditional ones that got sent over. But we don't know if the staff, we only find out if the staff celebrate that, if we're celebrating it and they go, oh, we don't actually make the lacquers like that, we make them like this. And you're like, well, that's interesting. Come and make them then, because I'm not
Yes.
Jewish.
Come and leave
So
them.
I'm following a recipe, but I'm happy to go with feedback here. But actually bringing those in, and like we all now know about Fat Thursdays because of the Polish community that we've got. So Fat Thursdays are one of my favourite days in the whole time of the year. You get proper Polish donuts and they get delivered to the nursery and they're absolutely amazing. But if you ask most of the staff, you say to them Fat Thursday, they're like, oh God, I love Fat Thursday, because we've put it to jam donuts. But to the Polish community, it's huge. But so maybe we should ask them on their applications or their new staff form, what days are important to you to celebrate. But that could be an interesting thing to actually start. I don't know where we'd record that on iMan though. That's my
No.
next thought process. I'm going on to where would we record that?
Either that or a one-to-one conversation in their first day in their induction, maybe a bit more personalised.
That would be really nice, wouldn't it? Yeah, rather than recording it on a data system, is ask the managers, or you know, when you're doing the induction with this member of staff, you know, prompt them to ask,
Yeah.
I'm not sure we need to check that they've asked, you know, and kind of all that, but it would be really nice to help people feel more welcome, wouldn't it, if we actually show an interest in what it is that's important to them.
And it's also getting to know them, because we used to pay, we did used to pay because it was a charity, but EMAS, so the Ethnic Minority Association Support Group, which is in Portsmouth, but every local authority with a high cultural diversity within the city or kind of their location will have an EMAS group. And they come out and they lend you boxes of cultural bits and pieces of stories and how to, like, lesson plans and stuff to be with children. And we used to have a lady and her name was Yin. I loved her. Like, she used to come in, and every Chinese New Year she would come in, and we changed our Chinese New Year celebrations because of Yin. So she
Yeah.
would basically say, like, what, you know, kind of you would never eat noodles on Chinese New Year. It's definitely this. And we're like, oh my God, didn't know that. That's fine. So we always had rice. We always had this chicken and this beef, you know, because it was never just a chow mein that they had. That's just a rush dinner. Like, we had a proper, so she would teach us culturally as adults for the children. And she'd bring in the dragon, they'd do the dancing and that sort of stuff. But it was more, again, it's authentic. They were learning from somebody from that culture and kind of having that. And I think we don't do enough. That's one thing we've been talking about with doing this review for EAL, is actually we don't actually have that connection in the community anymore, or brave enough to ask a parent of another culture, would you come and read to the children? Or, we've got this celebration coming up at the moment, and I understand that you celebrate, or you believe in, like, Hindi sort of celebrations. Would you come and help us with this? You know, understand that they're not brave enough to go and do that. So it's supporting them to have the confidence to go and ask, because you'll get more, the children get more, and the child becomes very proud that their parent or their sister or someone from their community is there. They're like, they're mine. And you're like, yes, they are, and they're sharing it with us. Yeah. And the staff as well, it brings the staff in on that as well. So I think it's
Yes,
just
yes.
so important, so important.
Yeah. Okay. Well, perhaps we can take that back to the ops team and see if we can make that time, you know,
That's what we're working on currently
very
with the
busy
EL
world.
policy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Fab. Good. I promised you a few books. Here's some examples of books. Some of these are actually recorded on video, I noticed as well. So you can pull them up on YouTube and play them, you know, read by the author, for example. And obviously they're going to be relevant if you have a child that's come from, say, Afghanistan, or a child that's come from a war-torn country. But I quite like the Paddington Suitcase. I mean, this is a traditional British book that's been around for a long time, about a little bear who's traveling with his suitcase on his trip. And I think, you know, our children could relate to that, and have the props to go with it potentially. And I quite like this little one as well. No matter who you are, everybody's welcome. Just saying that point might be enough to make the child or the adult who's maybe on the edge, who's not sure that they're welcome, to actually hear that. And it might also encourage children and adults to welcome the adult or the child who's new.
I
So
do think as well, it is about just thinking of a personal situation recently with Esther. She's got a little girl, Ukrainian little girl's just come over, and
yeah,
she does have additional needs. And you can tell that she's got some trauma. She definitely
yeah,
had
of
trauma.
course. Yeah.
And she had a little girl group round to our house for a stay at, like, this, like a little play date, and they were all taking the mick.
Oh,
And I was like, absolutely not in my
no,
house. So
no,
we then
absolutely.
spoke about kind of, and I showed a zero tolerance to it, you know, kind of
Good
like I
for
was like,
you. Yeah,
I'm not
absolutely.
doing this. And Esther, you could see, was a little bit like, oh no. And I said, I'm not angry or cross, but I need you to understand what's happening. So I went through and I fully explained stuff. I didn't say anything too gary or gory or anything, but I then went into the school, because they're all in the same class, and
Good
spoke
for
to the
you.
teacher. And I said, I think it's absolutely disgusting that I'm teaching three girls from your class about a child that's in your class, and you haven't had this conversation with them, that how many others are doing that and going home to a family that potentially isn't as accepting and open as I am, and they're actually then breeding that animosity towards her,
Yes,
and then we're
absolutely.
still not helping her. So you need to do something about it. That's what you need to do. And then the head phoned me and basically was like, no, you've got a point. We've got a couple now that's spread around the school. We're going to do some like information and stuff around it. And I said, I just think it's, if you don't tell the children where they've come from and they need friends and they need to be supported and they need to be kind, they're just going to be children and they're going to do things that are a bit different to what we do. It's going to be a little bit funny sometimes, but actually you never laugh at someone, you know, kind of. So they're now looking at how they can belong in the class more, because
Good.
it's not it's not right. It's not
It's not acceptable, and there are lots of resources out there, like
so
this one,
much.
beautiful book.
Yeah.
My name is not refugee. It's
Yes.
not. She has a name.
Yep.
So yeah, I think, and it's so tough, and we're going to see more of this. We've got to be ready for more refugees coming into
Yeah.
Egypt, and we've got to do the right thing by them.
And I think it's the education out to the current parents that is also important. We can do it all inside. We can do it all inside. We can work with that family. If you
Yeah.
have one pet, sadly, there's normally more than one that have a certain viewpoint of refugees or immigration and that sort of stuff. And it's,
Yeah.
you know, kind of, if you don't then go and like face that, not in a confrontational way, is actually say we don't tolerate that here. It's not acceptable at all. And you're teaching that person,
Yeah.
it's never going to leave with that child out of your building to then create that considerate child, because they're always
Yeah.
going to get it from home in a different way. So I think we've got a lot of work to do. That's one area that I've written down. We've got a lot of work to do with sharing everybody is welcome with all of our parents.
Yeah.
Saying that, it's the first year we never got any complaints about Pride. Doing Pride, nobody, we have received no complaints this year, but we've been doing celebrating Pride now for several years, and it shouldn't have taken this long, I'm going to be honest with you, but actually I took that as a success, that actually we'd shared that out and the reasons for it, so we just need to keep plugging the same message of we're not backing down, this is our
Yeah.
belief. Yeah.
Absolutely. And it may be that it's now time to do something similar to the Pride thing with refugees,
Yeah.
so that parents understand our position on it and why. You know, it's a benefit to the community, not a loss. But this was a particularly nice little book. We do have a budget for.
I think even more so with all the even more so the communication out with all the press that's going on about the migration situation. You know, it's because there is a negativity that's surrounding it at the moment. So yeah.
So we need to get this back to our marketing group as well, to make sure that we do our bit to promote welcome to people of all. I mean, once they're in the country, they're, you know, very welcome as far as we're concerned. Obviously, we don't want to support illegal immigrants, you know, the criminal gangs that organize it and all that kind of stuff. And it's not our responsibility to patrol the borders. But once we have children and families in our settings, then of course we welcome them as valuable members of the community. And I think that's the point here. Watch out to ensure they're included, because our dominant children who've been in the setting for years, who, you know, live locally, know the school, will dominate play in the nurseries, as will our white females dominate attitudes and behaviours, you know, as staff in the nurseries. So we need to equip ourselves and our colleagues to challenge that, to make sure that we make the space for people to be listened to, and that we then do something about what we hear. Recognizing that, you know, managers and teams that are under huge stress for short staffing, you know, this is something else that we need to get them to do when they might not have the brain capacity to do it. So it's not ever going to be like, you know, heavy discipline if they're not as proactive as they should be. More gentle encouragement and persuasion, and making it as easy for them as we can. Obviously, if they were actually come up with a bigoted comment, that would be totally unacceptable. It's where the line is, and I guess that's something for people and operations to monitor. You know, where is our line? Is someone that's completely neutral acceptable, or do we need them to actually step up and challenge bigotry when they hear it? So I think we should be expecting people to challenge it, but recognizing some people might not be in the right space themselves to be able to do that. for whatever their reasons are. It's not easy. Finding something specific to do to recognise the family that may be being excluded, again, whether that's staff or children. And then can we advocate for them? So as a company, is there something we need to do with the community or with our politicians, MPs, councillors, when some unjust attitude or behaviour comes to light? You know, what can we do? I mean, for the moment, I'm advocating for all babies and toddlers that come from poor families to have meals paid for in nurseries. You know, they do when they get to school. Why not in nurseries? And that would help pick up, you know, the refugee children as well. Anybody that's having a tough time making ends meet, we should be feeding them in nurseries, no matter what their age is, whether they're 12 months old or 36. So that's something I'm quite passionate about, because I don't think it's right in this day and age for us to have people who are hungry in our nurseries, staff or child. So there we are. Let's just summarise. We've had a look at reduced inequalities. I think we all recognise we've got quite a lot to do, but I think it's up to the relevant departments, nurseries, to reflect on where they are and what their action plan is, and perhaps communicate that with the council and the board if there's anything that the company can do, or the board can do, council can do, and same with, you know, with other nurseries that might be listening. So a final couple of minutes. Anybody got any questions or comments on SDG 10? No? No, I think it's been very useful, if very low attendance, but I think that reflects the pressure a lot of people are on at the moment, which is why we've recorded it, just to help spread the word in this way. Okay, everybody. Sandy, have you got anything to conclude with?
No, I just thought it was just quite a nice discussion going through there with some you know, lovely sort of comments, really, you know, rather than just you sat there. I know you like to get feedback and you like to get interaction, so I thought that was quite a good discussion, really, going through that. Very, very enlightening, very opening, and yeah, it's got my head whirring. So yeah.
It's good just to be able to make the space for it. I mean, I know it's only 1 hour in 2 months, but at least this hour we can think about, you know, the SDG and how it impacts on what we do day to day and at work. I mean, I value the opportunity, and I look forward to having a study of SDG 11 for next time. So thank you, everybody. We'll get on with our day now, but hopefully you've got a couple of little action points, everybody, to take back. Okay.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you. Bye.